Another website that I would suggest that you can go to get stuff that's outside of the Adobe's world is this site here. This is fontsquirrel.com. Now, first off, there are thousands of websites out there that will give you access to free fonts. Okay. You can do that all day, forever, and you can find the stuff. All right. But this one is the one that I've seen that is mostly everything's free. The problem that you run into with anything that you're trying to find for free is malware and spyware for those of you on the Windows computers. So to prevent that, I try to find websites that are kind of safe. And free and Font Squirrel is kind of one of those that doesn't have a lot of cookies to accept and spyware and adware that they're going to throw at you. It's just basically the straight ahead text that sits there. So you have the ones that are here by default that they'll show you that most people go and grab. But over here on the side, on this right hand side, you have kind of a way to go through the different classifications and the filters that are available to find the fonts that you want. Um, and this again, this website has this the best, where it has this listing that you can go through. A lot of these free websites don't have this sitting over here on this right hand side. They just don't have this little search system here. So it's going to be easy to find stuff a lot of times with what you're looking for. And you can, go through each one of the different categories, the different classifications, the different tags, the different filter, at aspects that they have there and see what they got. And you would be, thoroughly surprised. Now, the ones that you find, it'll say, if it says download, usually it's a direct download. You can just click on that button to download the true type font or the open type font. It'll say OTF for open type, TTF for true type, and you'll be able to download it directly. I'm trying to see if I can find one. I may have to go back to the front page. Yep, let me go back because usually there's a one or two on the first page. Yep, this one right here. See how it says download, but then it says offsite right there in the parentheses. So download offsite, what that means is that it's going to take you to another website that will have this font family complete that you can buy. And then the one that they're showing you here is probably one that you can get as an example or a demo, or on-screen use only kind of font. But those you would have to, of course, buy the whole entire thing. Now, buying fonts, do I suggest it? No, because you have so many free ones that are out there that you could probably get it for free instead of buying it. But if you have to purchase it. Usually it's going to cost you anywhere as low as $8 to as high as $3,600 monthly. And I'm not lying about that. There, you go to YouTube, you'll eventually find this. There is a documentary that is called Helvetica. Let's see if I can Helvetica documentary. Let's see if I can find this thing. It's a documentary that from a I say a long, long time ago, like it's in ancient days. It was made back in 2007, so for some of us that is like forever ago. But it talks about um Helvetica, the actual font, and the company or family that owns that font, and how it's so like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. This particular font was used all over the place. Advertising, signs, some variations were used for different purposes and different reasons. You ever seen the stop sign? That's what it is. Um, a lot of times you may be able to find the video out there in the world. Sometimes though, it's difficult to find the whole entire video. This looks like the whole thing. It's an hour 21 minutes. Ah, look at me. I found it. All right, I'll give you this link too because I'm not going to lose this. Um, but that Helvetica series, like, just kind of covered typography, Adobe as a company, the company that owned Helvetica, the problems they had with each other. And Helvetica honestly would cost you like $3,600 a month in licensing fees for using their font in your advertising. It was wild. It was crazy. If you're creating logos for a company or doing branding work for a company, a lot of times the font that you decide to use, you may have to go and get a licensing fee in which to use that font in that branding, because it gets that serious. People want money. And easy way to do that is to create, some type of letters that people love, and then they want to use it. And you can charge a lot of money, whatever you want, because they always want to use it. But then that also creates trolls who will go out and find another version. Like there are versions of Helvetica that looks almost exactly like this, but it's not. It's different. And it's different by a small amount. Like if you actually take a typography class, we start talking about measurements in millimeters. So the spacing between each letter, the size, the height, the width of the letter, um, all of those different things factor into the placement and the aesthetics of that letter, and it's nuts. It really is, because it can get kind of crazy. And again, I'm not trying not to jump too far down the rabbit hole of things. Classifications. You got different classifications of fonts. I want to talk about two major ones, that's important right now. The rest of them are kind of you learn on your own and feel if that's important to you or not. And the two of them is serif and sans serif. So back to the history lesson. Medieval fonts going into regular fonts that could be used in the printing press. They started off being what is called serif typefaces. Kind of fancy. Serif means tail. So if you look at this one that I got highlighted here, this is a very slight serif based font. You see the L, the Y, the B, the H there, even the letter C has these little tails on the ends of the letters. And those little serif tails can be very, very fancy or very, very simple. Um, the idea of it was the serif font still looked fancy enough to be, fancy lettering, but it also made you have to concentrate to read the letter out. Remember, you're talking about uneducated people right now. So for the uneducated masses, in order to get them to read, you had to create something that looked good, but drew them in to make them concentrate to figure out what that letter is, so they can figure out what this group of letters word would make a word, those group of letters to make a sentence, the group of letters to make a paragraph, the book, the magazine, whatever it is that you're having them read. So they created serif fonts first, to entice people to read the printed material. All right. Then, as time went on, the serif lettering got fancier and fancier. You see, you got different versions of the serif, here. And then what started happening is that the serif lettering, as good as it looked, if you put it up on a sign that somebody had to read from a distance, sometimes these serif tails, as simple as you think it is when you're reading it, it gets too complicated from a distance. So they created what is called sans serif. That would be something that looked like this. Sans serif font doesn't have the tail. Sans serif, sans tails, no tail. So they don't have a little tail on them. And that makes them a little bit easier to faster and quicker to read, and make things out. So because they're not as fancy. So simplified lettering. Now, for a sign, sans serif fonts are great because you can read it from a distance. The tails don't get in the way. Also, most of the time, sans serif fonts are thicker in the body of them. If you notice these, the reason why I kept on this page, you look at this serif font versus any of these sans serif fonts. The serif font is a little thinner in the body of it, which makes the tails kind of be accented more, whereas the sans serif ones are a little thicker in the body, makes it easier to read from a distance. On screen, depending on the size of the letters, serif fonts on screen, when they get tiny and small, they become a little more difficult to read out versus, larger size. And this is 16 point type, by the way, that you're looking at right now on screen, with my, you know, monitor. If you go down to the legalized 8 point, it won't even get that low. Legally, the text can't be smaller than 8 points. So that's in the law books. To be legible, letters. But you see, even at 14 points, you see how small this is. The serif fonts are a little more difficult to read, whereas the sans serif ones, depending on the width of them, may be a little bit easier to read out and make out what that lettering is. So on screen, sans serif worked better than the serif text did, depending on size. So you had uses for, these different classifications. So keep that in mind when it comes to figuring out which font you want to use for your projects. Okay. All right. Now let's get out of this and let's get over here to good old Photoshop and let's talk about um, using text within Photoshop. Now, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, those three programs share the same uh, panels to access text and to be able to edit and create text. So I'm going to make myself a new document here real quick if I can. Come on. The hamsters are not moving fast today. All right, so I'll make myself a new document. I'm just going to keep it simple. Let's go 10-inch wide, 10-inch tall. It doesn't need to be that high with the resolution, so I'll stick to 150. RGB for the color mode. I want the background contents to be set to white so I can see the letters. Again, black letters against that white background works the best, when demonstrating things. So yeah, I set all this up. I hit create and I make my what? Why did that come up? The heck has happened? Okay, let me try that again. Huh. Why is it doing this? I don't know. I found some glitch in the matrix. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why. I think it's something going on with my computer. Hopefully nothing crashes or goes crazy. But let me just put in the same numbers that I did before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me hit OK. Meh. Now that I have that, I don't know why that happened like that, but I'm not really caring right now. Okay, so to create text in your project, in the toolbox, you have a letter T, which is your type tool. That is always going to be your type tool. Every Adobe program that has the ability to create text in it, you're always going to have the letter T as your tool to use. With that type tool, you have multiple tools hidden underneath it. You have your regular horizontal type tool, which you're going to use the most of. You have a vertical type tool, which will put the letters on stacked over top of each other um, vertically. And then you have these type mask tools that you will never use ever. You'll never ever use them ever. There's no reason to really even be there because you'll never use them. Just honestly, you won't. Um, now, why won't you? Because there's a better way of doing what it's trying to do. It's trying to create a layer mask out of the letters. So the only part of the picture that you see is through the letters. I showed you clipping groups in the last class, in the last lecture, where you can create a clipping group out of two layers. That's the better way to do it. And I'll show it to you here. If I got time, I'll show those things off to you. Now, with your type tool, it's going to look like this at first, a little square with a I-beam kind of looking shape in the middle of it. That means that you can create yourself a new text layer. Now, in Photoshop, you got two ways of making that text layer. The first way is just clicking into any space, any empty space, and what will happen is that it will create one line of text called lorem ipsum. If you don't know what this is placeholder text. If you look up lorem ipsum, on Google, you will find the history about it and what it's dealing with. There's a website called lipsum.com, lipsum.com, that goes over the history of lorem ipsum and even gives you a generator to be able to generate paragraphs of that text if you want to. It's essentially just a section of Greek text, like those old poems, like Homer's The Iliad, or I can't remember the other one, the Iliad, and a whole bunch of other those Greek tragedy poems. Somebody took a section of that poem and created paragraphs of text to use as placeholder until you get the actual text copy that needs to be here. So in your Adobe programs, especially, whenever you use the type tool and just click an empty spot, you're going to get at least one line of that Lorem Ipsum poem showing up as placeholder until you type in whatever it is that you're trying to say. All right. Then once you type that in, you go from there. Now, this version of the type container, this is called artistic type. And we call it that, or I call it that, because you're trying to do artistic things with these letters. You're trying to apply filters and make it fancy and probably make it big and do some fun things with it with the lettering. That's what artistic type. Um, what you could do with this artistic type layer, because if you look over in the layers palette, you'll get a new layer. It'll be called layer one right now until I'm done typing. It'll have a letter T for the thumbnail to indicate that it's a type layer. While I have this layer active and working, a couple of things I'll be able to do. My type tool changes up to, an arrow when I'm away from the letters. And when I get closer to the letters, then it switches over to that I beam. While it's an arrow like this, I can drag my text around and reposition it. So if it's not in the right spot, I can reposition it as I need to. When it turns to the I-beam, it allows me to highlight that text, to retype, to format, or anything like that. Or just click into the spot next to the letters and I get that cursor blinking so I can add more text into here. Now, as far as adding text, there is no text container, meaning there's nothing that's holding these letters in place right now. So I can type as much as I want, and everything just keeps going all on the same one line. So there's only one line of type that I have with this artistic type. If you want to create multiple lines of text, type a lot of stuff real quick. If you want to create multiple lines of text, I'm trying to just get rid of, come on. If you want to create more than one line of text in the same text container for this artistic type, you'd have to manually hit your return key on your keyboard so you could type in the next line of text, as you need to. So you'd have to manually put in your paragraph breaks, as they're called. So there's no word wrapping or anything like that that you may have in other programs and such, because the computer has no idea what you're doing at the moment. Now, type as much as you want. When it comes to formatting, you have two main ways of accessing the formatting. One way is highlighting the text and then going up here to the options bar while you're using your type tool and set the different options that are up here. Most of the options are some of the character formatting and some of the paragraph formatting options that you would have. It's not everything, it's just a little small bit of it that you more than likely going to use the most of. You could pick the font that you want to use, from the list of all the different fonts you have available in your system. One cool thing about these programs now is that as you hover over each one of the fonts, you could see what the letters look like if you can see it. So that makes it easier to try to figure out exactly what you want to apply. Next to each one of the font names, you will see an icon that represents what type of font it is. Like this little figure eight cloud looking thing indicates that that is an open type font coming from Adobe. The TT is the true type fonts. Might be Adobe, may not be Adobe. The letter O that you may see on some of them, it's an open type font, but Adobe probably doesn't own it or have a license for it. So it's not from their repository. It could be from some other place with that open type font, but it's still an open type font. You will not see the PostScript fonts anymore because none of them will show up here any longer. It's just the way they are. Next to each one of the font names, you'll have these little stars. These stars allow you to allow you to say that this is one of your favorites. Uh, Being a favorited font, a font that's a favorite, means that you'll always have it at the top of the list at all times. And then up above all the fonts listed there, see right here, this little star. If I click on that star, it shows me just the ones that I have as my favorite. No matter where they are in the list of things, you can always, find it there. Now, other parts, where it says all classes, these are your different classes of fonts for what you have installed on this computer of yours. So your list, my list would be longer and shorter based on that. But you can go through those different classes to kind of filter through different things. You have these little buttons here across the top, like where that star was, to be able to see just your Adobe fonts, the ones that you've installed on your computer. Fonts that, oh, the variable fonts. We don't have time to talk about variable fonts too much, but variable fonts are kind of cool. And that's the next evolution of fonts that are out there, is making variable fonts. It allows you to take one letter set, like this railway here, and be able to make it as thick or as thin as you want it to be. So you're not limited by the style of regular and italic and thin and bold and heavy, and all. You can make it whatever you want as far as the thickness. It's kind of cool. With the way that it works, it's just a matter of utilizing it. And then again, you have another one. You have the star, which is your favorites. But then this one right here, I really like the little double wave, the little double line there. It allows you to find fonts similar to the one that you already have selected. So these are the ones that are on my computer that look like that railway, because that was the one I had selected at the time. And then the ones that say here fonts from Adobe, these are the ones that are on Adobe's website that I haven't installed yet. And this is where things can get fun. You can have these fonts that are not even installed yet on your computer. You can actually install them by clicking on this little cloud icon that's there on the right. And it'll install that font on your computer. So that way you have it. Basically, it installs it into the Creative Cloud account. Creative Cloud account then installs it on the computer. So now it's available not only in this program, but your other programs too. Once you install it from that one. So that allows you to kind of sort through things, as you feel you need to. Every once in a while, you may want to come in here the next time that you pick a font and hit this clear all button to kind of clear out any filtering that you may have applied and don't even realize it, don't even notice it, because that happens. It happens a lot. More fonts up here at the top. Whenever you see that, that is a direct connection to the Adobe site. So you may have to give it time for it to process like mine is doing. Hopefully nothing crashes. Come on. And then this now is the fonts that are not on your computer that are available at that Adobe font site that you could search through. They have horror as an option. That's funny. That you could search through and try to find fonts that fit the aesthetic of what you're trying to do. And then if you find something that you like, you'll get that little cloud with the arrow pointing down to be able to install that font. I just wanted to see what these horror fonts look like. True Gore Regular, BMX Radical. Some of the names that they use are hilarious. Come on. See, it's got to find it, and then it's got to install it, or they even install temporarily just to even show it to me. That's why I'm getting the beach ball of death. That's what I call this. A little spinning beach ball of death. Because that usually means something bad is happening. Like my computer's been on too long and I need to restart this thing and turn some stuff off. Which, if anybody is like me, okay, well, it inserted it in there. I didn't want to install it, but it did it anyway. But it gives me the font. You can see what it looks like, and I can pick from there. You have your different styles. So this is where the bold and the italic and all that would show up, where it says regular up here in the options bar. This little TT right here is the size of the letters. So I can, click and drag, to, change the size, or I can type in the size difference that I want, hit enter, and then I'll get the new size of the letters as I feel that I need to have them. And that's a kind of a neat little font there. Where it says sharp right here, this is where that anti-aliasing kicks in. Matter of fact, let me make the letters big again. Let's see if we can make the letters bigger and see if this anti-aliasing makes any sense. So look at the edges of the letters here. So sharp is the default, which means it's going to give a nice, clean look to the letters. Make sure the anti-aliasing is not making everything look too fuzzy and kind of crazy. If I put it to none, is it going to digitize this? Give it a second for it, give it a little bit for it to process. A lot of times, if you pick none, it turns the anti-aliasing completely off. And depending on the size of the letters, you may be able to see how everything kind of pixelates in the smaller spots, kind of jagged along the edges and such. Uh, I can see it on my computer. I don't know if you could see it on your end watching this video, but I can see right along the outside edge there. It's not as smooth as the sharp was. Crisp is another one that's a little bit better than sharp, but sometimes it kind of cuts away some of the letter shape. So crisp may not be exactly what you want. Strong and smooth is going to increase the anti-aliasing to make thinner letters look a little thicker and stronger looking, whereas smooth tends to smooth out some of the jaggedness that you may have. Like for this particular font, I would probably pick the smooth option because I want this looks like it's supposed to be like tendrils of, I don't know, blood or ooze or swamp mess or something that's supposed to be more liquidy. So I would probably pick smooth for this. So that way it has a smoother look than probably what crisp or the strong or the sharp would look like. Look at sharp and look at now. This is something that's very subtle. You may see a difference, you may not see a difference. It's up to you totally when it comes to that. And it depends on the size and the font that you're using. Because some of the fonts, when you make it a particular size, it really won't be able to tell the difference because the letters are too small. So you won't be able to tell the difference whether you make this the smooth or whether you make this the sharp, are you going to see a big difference? It just depends. So use that to your advantage as you need to. You also have your alignments of left, right, center alignment there that you could pick from. And it's aligning the where I clicked to start this to start creating this text, which is right here in front of the letter C. I clicked at that spot. That's where I started typing. So it's aligning based on that position, not your page. So you will see your text like fly off to the side, like mine is doing right now. That it just does that. That's got nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything weird or anything like that. It's just when you choose the alignment, it moves everything off to the side. And when you have just one line of text instead of both of them selected, you could change the alignment of each one to be different. And again, it's based on where you first clicked to create the alignment, and it's going to base on that and build off that. Uh, Color. Next to that, the alignment, you have that black square that represents the color of the text. Initially, the color of the text is going to be whatever your foreground color square is, or sometimes it'll default to black on its own. And then after that, you can pick a color that you want each letter to be, or the entire, sentence or whatever that you're writing. You can highlight the whole thing, and you can change the font color by just simply highlighting and then clicking on the square to change the color, and you would change it from up there at the top. um I want to skip over this little letter T for right now. I want to go to this button here. This opens up your character and paragraph panels, so wherever they are located, mine's are over here on the left hand side next to my toolbox. You have a lot more options over here in the character and paragraph panel than you will have up in the options bar. It's just a matter of what do you prefer? I kind of prefer going through the character and paragraph panel than going to the options bar. If I need to do something quick, options bar. But if I need to make sure that this text is looking the way I need it to look and, have all the options to it, of course, going to the character panel. Now, I'm going to try to go over. this character panel, and then this paragraph panel. I'm just going to move them out here so you can see them a little bit better. Go through here one line at a time, one row at a time, what this stuff is and what's available, and then what's available in the panel options button, the little hamburger off to the side, so you can see what you got to work with. So you get kind of an idea. You may hear this again if you take, the vector class or the page layout class, because these two panels are the exact same panels in other programs. So other programs that have the type tool, they're going to have these same two character and paragraph panels with pretty much the same exact options. So character panel, first row, picking the font family as well as the style. We already went through that. Showed you that already. So I can change this up to, let's say, Verdana. And then under Verdana, I got a couple of more style options that I didn't have before. Then you have the next row down is the size of your text over here on the left. Again, just to emphasize things, legally, the smallest your text can be is 8 point, meaning copyright, photo credits, um, photo credits, contracts, privacy policy statements, any of those things that somebody has to be legally bound to. The smallest you can make those letters are 8 points in size. After that, anything smaller than that is considered decoration. So legally, they're not bound to it. And it's based on the font that you're using, because 8 point type in one font, like say in Verdana, looks like this, versus Bevan, it looks like this, a little bit bigger. Some other ones it maybe look a whole lot smaller, and harder to see. So it's subjective, is what I'm bringing up there, because there'll be times when you may run into that as an issue. Dealing with legal paperwork and stuff like that you got to lay out and create. Next to the font size, you have what is called leading. Leading is a space between your lines of text. So I got two lines of text here, right? So auto is an automatic single spacing between them. So between, each paragraph line, you got a single spaced uh, alignment. So if I go with a higher number than the normal single spacing, or this, or I'm sorry, I messed up something. Leading is setting up the space between your lines of text. When you have auto sitting there, you got your normal single spacing, which is your font size, whatever your font size is, and you can add probably 2 to 4 extra points to that number, and that'll be your normal single spacing. If you change this leading to a smaller number than your font size, you'll bring the lines of text closer together. If you increase it, you'll push them further apart. Simple as that. And it's kind of interactive. If you have the lines selected together, you can interactively see, what happens. Everybody has their own kind of way of doing things. Me, I like to bring these letters as close as possible to each other, where they're still readable. That's one of my styles of doing things. Why do I do that? I don't know. I like it, and no one has told me that it was terrible yet. Some people don't like the idea, so that I end up changing it, from my style, from what I like, to what, they actually want. But that's one of the things that I tend to do, is try to get the letters as close to each other as possible, because one of being far apart, for me, spacing wise, balance of space and that sort of thing, I just don't like all that negative space there. I'd rather it be closed up a little bit. It doesn't have to be right on top of each other. That doesn't make sense. But little bit of separation is good. Little bit of negative space, you don't need a whole lot. All right, past that. The next row down, the VA to the left is what is called your kerning. Kerning is when you have two letters that are too close to each other, like this L and this I, and you want to change the spacing between them. So you want to increase that number to change the space between the L and I here on line, because you feel that they're too close. Now, it probably won't be this type of extreme. There'll probably be, lower numbers to bring them closer together. Or if you go negative, you start to create what is called a ligature, which means that they're going to be looking like they're fused together. Ligatures are kind of fun, especially like if you create a ligature for as a stylistic thing, like at the beginning of a word. Sometimes that's kind of neat looking, as long as you could still tell the difference between the two letters. It makes some sort of sense. Like doing for next here, the X and the T could be ligature together. The N and the E could be ligature together. But if I try to take this E and this X, I could probably bring them closer together. But if I try to fuse them by doing that, people sometimes lose out that this is saying the word next. But it may actually work for you. It all depends on what you're doing and what type of and how much spacing you're going to give it with this kerning. But this is a way to kind of make, a fun design choice that could be, you know, a thing to play with. But be careful and don't use it like for everything. Let me do the word, these letters here. So next to the kerning, you have what is called tracking. Now, tracks, now to go back a minute and go through history, leading, we would refer to lead strips that they would put in between the type dies. Remember the old printing press where you had to set the type and put the type in place? You would put lead strips between each line of text to separate them. So that's where leading comes from. Tracking is the space between words. So you would create lead tracks, which would be, vertical. Yeah, vertical, to put between the different words to separate the words out. So tracking, it was supposed to be for the space between words. So if you want to increase or decrease the tracking, essentially you highlight that word so you can bring, you know, the whole words closer together or further apart. This is doing what is called copy fitting. When you have a bunch of text, but you have a limited space, a lot of times you can go in and do some little kerning and tracking, throughout to try to change the spacing between the lines of text, each individual letter or each word if you want to. Another thing that the kerning that they discovered that the tracking does, if you highlight a group of letters, you can change the spacing between all the letters at one time with the tracking because you're changing the tracks between the letters. So you could do that. Um, these are all just to do the copy fitting, kerning, tracking, letting, you're using it to try to make sure your text fits where it needs to, gives the idea and the style that you need to, and what you want it to be. It is not something that you spend a lot. Well, it's something that you would spend a lot of time on if you got to get it completely correct. But it's not something that you have to go to all the time and use all the time. It's just there if you need it. It's available. Next row is the horizontal and vertical stretching of your selected letters. So if you need to stretch your letters out, again, stylistic purposes, make them taller than normal or make them wider than normal, to bring emphasis or things like that to it, you could do that sort of thing. Next row down is what is called baseline shift. All the text is written on this little invisible line, and you see the line here in Photoshop there that's underneath the letters. Right now, while I have my type tool active, that's called the baseline. And so what you can do is take a letter or a set of letters and shift it above or below that baseline, with just positive, negative values. Now, why would you do that? Again, it's a stylistic thing. You may want to have things, as a stylistic situation with what you're creating for a title or something like that. In the old days, when you wanted to create like a trademark symbol, it was like the TM. So what you would do is you would take that TM, type it in, make the size of the text smaller to the size you need it to be. Usually it's about a quarter to a full, from a half size to a full quarter size of the original font size. And then you can use the baseline shift to raise it up. Now, there's a whole other section that I'm trying not to get into with superscript, subscript, also inferiors and superiors and a whole bunch of other kind of madness with typography where people who are very um lack of a better way to calling it very anal can really get into um try to be specific about where things like this, how far up this should go, this TM, this trademark symbol should go. Should it go to where the top of the letters line up with the top of the letters, or should it be like the bottom of the letters being raised, line up with the top of the letters, or should the middle of the letters being raised line up with the top of the letters? That's you know superscript, subscript, or superscript superior versus exponents, and is it doing math? Is it what is it doing? So there's a lot that can go into it, and I'm not trying to get into that lot, but it is there. Um, just resizing the letters again. I don't need a trademark there anyway. What else was I getting into here? Oh, the color of the text. Again, we talked about that. Highlight the text, click on there to pick the color you want the letters to be, and they'll change to that color. You have that. Now, the next row is kind of a fun thing. You have these different buttons that allow you to make your text do different things that is not the norm. So if you did not have bold and or italic as a choice for a style. You have a button here that allows you to create what is called faux bold. It makes the text look like it's bold, emboldened. It's not the best choice to make because there's a lot of times where you turn some of these options on and you won't be able to apply a filter or a layer effect to the text because of that's being on. It won't tell you that. It'll just do it. It'll just, not do it. Then you have a faux italic where you could fake the italic so you can make the text look bold and italic even though you didn't have that as a style. The TT right here, which I got on, is in all caps. So it makes the text go in all caps. Then you have another one for small caps, where the letters become, go to a small cap state, which is sometimes kind of neat. You got that superscript and subscript, buttons to be able to create that if you need to. Then you have an underline and then a strike through. Again, how often you use those particular buttons, it's up to you. You will definitely not use them all at once because that will look terrible. But just from experience, the all cap and the small cap, I kind of go back and forth between those sometimes with what I'm doing. Now, I mentioned open type fonts, but I didn't really get down too far down the rabbit hole with them. With open type fonts, if you go and find an open type font that's either Adobe branded, so again, it's going to have the little cloud looking icon on it, or it's going to be an open type font that's not run by Adobe. Um, and you want to use it, that's fine. Then what ends up happening is that right below where you had the superscript and subscript and all that, you'll have these buttons that some of them will light up. Not all of them, just some of them. It basically is pulling from that open type, the features within that open type font, and just giving you buttons to be able to click onto to apply that open type feature, whatever it may be. Now, the problem is that a lot of times, just because you can see that it's lit up and that you can apply it, you don't have anything there to show. Like, for instance, see this one here with the 1ST for first? That is what is called an ordinal. So you have to actually make an ordinal. So if I type in 2ND for second, do I have to tab or do I have to highlight it? I think I got to highlight it and then I could hit the button to turn it on. No, it's not doing it. Why is it not doing it? Usually it'll work. Yep, hitting enter don't do it. And see, this shows you how often I use this, these little options down there, because what it's supposed to do is supposed to turn this one ST into the first, where the ST is, turned into kind of that superscript. It's superscripted and looking like that, like first like that, and sometimes it'll be underlined as well. So I can underline it. It just depends on that font, and how it decides to work. But that's what it's supposed to do. Just like the 1/2 there, if I type in 1/2, whoops, I'm doing it all in superscript. If I type in 1/2 and hit tab or enter or something like that, it's supposed to convert that into 1/2 into an actual fractional, which is what that's called. It's called a fractional. Let's see, is it highlighted? Come on. This computer of mine. Oh, it's trying. There it goes. See how it goes to 1/2 like that? Oh, yeah. See that one's not working, and I don't know why. See, the ordinal's not working, but the fractional does work. That's going to be subjective to either operator error, myself not doing something right that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, which is standard because there's a lot that I don't know. Um, or it's just that particular feature doesn't work, even though it's lit up like it's supposed to work. It just doesn't work, and it's not working for this particular font. If I switch it to a whole different font, it may actually work. Which is that's the weird part about um, a lot of this is it's probably operator error. Some things will work and some things won't work. And it's nothing that you did that was wrong. It's just it's not working at that particular moment like you are expecting it to. So it's just what it is. Which is always weird to me. Oh, look at this. See, now it did it when I turned I had it on all caps, didn't do it. When I turned the all caps off, then see, now it does it. See, it's just again, you got to figure it out. It's just weird stuff like that you may not have time to figure out, or once you figure it out, you're like, oh, that's cool, it can do that, and then have no use for that whatsoever, anywhere else. So it is what it is. All right. Moving to our next thing. Hold on one second. I gotta answer a call real quick. Okay, I am back. There's nothing else with this here to talk about. So let's go over to the paragraph panel. This one's kind of easy, but let me do a different type layer before I talk about paragraphs of text. So when you're done typing, um, when you're done creating your text, up in your options bar, you have a check mark that you can click onto to confirm your typing. And it basically closes out of you typing your text. So basically it turns off. You'll see the little invisible baseline go away. You'll see the cursor blinking or anything you have highlighted that turns off when you hit that check mark. Another way of doing the same thing is just going over here to your layers palette and just clicking onto any layer. It doesn't have to be the type layer you just created. It could be clicking onto any layer that turns off the application of the thing. The thing I don't like about doing that option is clicking on another layer. Sometimes if you retype something and then click over here on the layer, sometimes, and well, it didn't do it this time, but older versions, it would cancel what you wrote. So if you were typing something and then click onto the type layer or clicked on another layer, you wouldn't get what you just changed. It would go back to the way it was when you're trying to edit or re-edit. With the type tool, you can go back at any point in time and select the text to retype and re-edit whenever you feel like it. You also can double click onto the thumbnail of of that type layer to reactivate your type tool and let you start typing again and retype whatever it is that you're trying to type. Let me throw this layer away. I don't need it any longer. The next version of a type container. So the first type container I showed you is called the artistic type. Usually you're using it to apply, you're creating text. The text is probably going to be nice and big, one or two lines of text. You can format it how you need to. And then the next thing you're going to be doing is doing layer effects and filters and all that other kind of stuff to it. Now, this one, you're creating a paragraph and you're creating, multiple paragraphs of text in this project. You'll probably be importing with a copy paste the text over or anything like that, and then format the text and get whatever you want. So this is paragraph text. In this case, you would use your type tool to click and drag and create a box. This box is going to be your text container. Once you let go of your mouse, you're going to get that lorem ipsum poem showing up, filling up as much of this container as it can with whatever formatting you already have for your text. So if your formatting is like small in size already, you probably won't have you'll have a lot of text fitting in there. If it's, kind of big like mine is, you won't have as much text initially with that lorem ipsum. But at this point, you can start typing your text out. And then as you type, when you get to the end of your text box, it will automatically word wrap to the next line down based on what you type. I wish I could type this fast and talk to people at the same time. My mother used to do this because she was a secretary for years and an administrative assistant. She used to be able to do this type of thing. And it was just a weird mutant power she had. And this was on a typewriter, and knew when to fix and create and make mistakes and all that other stuff that she used to do. But you could type as much as you want and everything with text wrap as it needs to. You can also copy paste. And usually copy paste is going to be the easier thing. So you have your text in a Word document or whatever, you select it, copy it, come over here to Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, whatever, click and drag to create the text box and then paste in whatever you got. Usually when you do the copy and paste, depending on where you're copying the text from, it'll bring the formatting of the text over with it. Sometimes it doesn't do all of it because Adobe is a real stickler about their formatting of text and making sure it's fitting within their rules that they have. And so you will run into situations where the formatting doesn't come over, the space, the size, sometimes the color, sometimes, most of the time it's just spacing and size that won't come over. And sometimes the font itself won't come over. The text will be there, but the font you chose over in that other program won't come over. Now, why? Because Adobe doesn't like that font. Something wrong with it. It doesn't like it. Not made by them or not affiliated with them in some kind of way. So they're just not bringing that font over. You'll find out with a lot of the fonts you have in your Microsoft Office programs. A lot of those fonts don't work. But um, getting off of that and onto this, when it comes to paragraphs of text, you have the same options to format that text through the character panel that we just covered. When it comes to your paragraph panel, you have your alignment. Excuse me. Your alignment options, which look a lot cleaner when start dealing with whole paragraphs. Left, right, center options. Next to that is a set of buttons for what is called a full justify. So that way, excuse me, the spacing between the words space themselves to fit the entire container. So if you make the container, because you can make this container wider or narrower on the fly, but depending on how wide you make the container, it'll change the space between the letters, between the words to fit in that container like in a block. A lot of times it doesn't look good because there's too much space in what you're doing, and it's difficult to control. At least over here in Photoshop, it's more difficult to control. And then the very last line of that block is going to be left, right, or center aligned. The last button in this is going to do a forced full justify, where all the lines are justified in that same way with a lot of spacing between the words. Even the last line has done that, and it that looks definitely weird. You're going to use left, right, center alignment the most, but this left aligned, justified, does work in certain situations depending on the font you're using and the other options in which you put everything in place. Now, below that, you have your indent with your left margin indent. So it just pushes the left side of the text over. Then next to that, you have your right side indent. Again, positive, negative numbers will push, things in or out. That sometimes helps with the spacing, especially if you go with the same number on both the left and the right hand side. For those of you who like hitting the tab key to indent the first line of a paragraph, uh, first off, you're not supposed to do that. I'm trying not to yell. First off, you're not supposed to do that. Hitting the tab key, traditionally, those of you using computers, you would indent the first line of the paragraph that way to indicate indicate where the paragraph starts. That's why you're doing it. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have this thing called first line indent, which is this little setting right here. And that does the indentation by however much you want it to indent by. Usually it's whatever your font size is. So if my font size is 14 point, I would put this at 14 for my first line indent. That would indicate the first line indentation. So that's the first line of the new paragraph. That's you can do, but that's not something that you should be doing if you can help it. Then you also have below that, you have the space before and space after a paragraph. Now, this is another thing people do. When they want to go from one paragraph to another, instead of hitting the return key once, they hit it twice. Why? Because they want this space between the paragraphs, right? That is not, again, what you're supposed to do. What you are supposed to do is do the space after the paragraph to actually choose how much spacing you want to have between your paragraphs. Again, how much? Usually your font size, the size of your lettering, that is a good way to work it, but you can also, be to whatever it is number that you want it to have a whole lot of space or not have a whole lot of space. Technically, anybody that's ever taken English and writing classes, there are different writing styles that are out there in the world. And your different writing styles will give you different rules. One will say indent the first line of the paragraph, and then the other one will say don't do that. Do the space between the paragraphs instead, because that's better. And my daughter went through that in school and was driving her crazy. Like, which one's the better one? Then she finally learned it doesn't matter. It just depends on what you're writing. Like if you're writing for a newspaper, they're going to adopt one way. If you're writing for a magazine, they're going to adopt another way. You're writing for essays and papers in college, they're going to that professor is going to adopt another way, and they want you to write in that way. So do it that way. There's other little stupid things that it is kind of a typography thing, but not like after a punctuation mark, you're supposed to put two spaces between the punctuation, the end of the sentence, and the next word, or is it one space? Some people do no space at all, and they just have it all run together. They're weirdos, but it's all subjective. That's all really all it is. All right, my time is almost up here with this text, and I'm almost done with this part here. I think that's it. Again, when you're done with your typing, you hit the check mark up there, and that stops you from stops the typing from happening, and you're ready to move on to whatever their next thing is. Now, this is kind of a primer on creating text.